Hi, grade threes. We are reading our book, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and we're on chapter 25 today. The title of the chapter is called The Great Elevator. "I've never seen anything like it," cried Mr. Wonka. "The children are disappearing like rabbits. But you mustn't worry about it. They'll all come out in the wash." Mr. Wonka looked at the little group that stood beside him in the corridor. There were only two children left now, Mike TV and Charlie Bucket. And there were three grown-ups, Mr. and Mrs. TV and Grandpa Joe. Do you guys think that Mike TV is safe? A lot of you think Charlie is safe. I wonder what you're thinking about Mike. Does he have lessons he needs to learn that Mr. Wonka might want to teach him? Let's find out. "Shall we move on?" Mr. Wonka asked. "Oh, yes!" cried Charlie and Grandpa Joe both together. "My feet are getting tired," said Mike TV. "I want to watch television." Uh-oh. "If you're tired, then we'd better take the elevator," said Mr. Wonka. "It's over here. Come on, in we go." He skipped across the passage to a pair of double doors. The doors slid open. The two children and the grown-ups went in. Are you worried? Wondering what's going to happen to Mike? "Now then," cried Mr. Wonka, "which button shall we press first? Take your pick." Charlie Bucket stared around him in astonishment. This was the craziest elevator he had ever seen. There were buttons everywhere. The walls and even the ceiling were covered all over with rows and rows and rows of small black push buttons. There must have been 1,000 of them on each wall and another 1,000 on the ceiling. It's a pretty good visual. I'm able to get a picture in my brain. Are you? And now Charlie noticed that every single button had a tiny printed label beside it telling you which room you would be taken to if you pressed it. "This isn't just an ordinary up and down elevator," announced Mr. Wonka proudly. "This elevator can go sideways and longways and slantways and any other way you can think of. It can visit any single room in the whole factory, no matter where it is. You simply press the button and zing, you're off." "Fantastic," murmured Grandpa Joe. His eyes were shining with excitement as he stared at the rows and rows of buttons. "The whole elevator is made of thick, clear glass," Mr. Wonka declared. "Walls, doors, ceiling, floor, everything is made of glass so you can see out." "But there's nothing to see," said Mike TV. "Choose a button," said Mr. Wonka. "The two children may press one button each, so take your pick. Hurry up! In every room, something delicious and wonderful is being made." It's kind of exciting. Quickly, Charlie started reading some of the labels alongside of the buttons. "The Rock Candy Mine, 10,000 feet deep," it said on one. "Coconut Ice Skating Rinks," it said on another. Then, "Strawberry Juice Water Pistols, Toffee Apple Trees for planting out in your garden, all sizes. Exploding candy for your enemies. Luminous lollies for eating in bed at night. Mint jujubes for the boy next door. They'll give him green teeth for a month. Cavity-filling caramels. No more dentists." Good idea. "Stick jaw for talkative parents. Wriggle sweets that wriggle delightfully in your tummy after swallowing. Invisible chocolate bars for eating in class. Candy-coated pencils for sucking. Fizzy lemonade swimming pools. Magic hand fudge. When you hold it in your hand, you taste it in your mouth. Rainbow drops. Suck them and you can spit in 6 different colors." Connecting to the Skittles experiment that Miss Giebert did with you guys. Did you get some ideas for rooms that you would create? Mr. Wonka is so creative, and I know you guys are too, so I'm curious. Keep that in mind. I want to see some ideas from you. Come on, cried Mr. Wonka. "We can't wait all day." "Is there a television room in all this lot?" asked Mike TV. "Certainly there's a television room," Mr. Wonka said. "That button over there." He pointed with his finger. Everybody looked. "Television chocolate. it said on the tiny label beside the button. Whoopee! Shouted Mike TV. That's for me. He stuck out his thumb and pressed the button. I'm worried for him. Are you? What's going to happen to Mike? Instantly, there was a tremendous whizzing noise. The doors clanged shut, and the elevator leaped away as though it had been stung by a wasp. Ooh, good description. But it leapt sideways, and all the passengers, except Mr. Wonka, who was holding onto a strap from the ceiling, were flung off their feet onto the floor. It's not very nice. Mr. Wonka, Grandpa Joe's an old man, and he didn't tell him? Makes me wonder about Mr. Wonka. Get up! Get up! Cried Mr. Wonka, roaring with laughter. But just as they were staggering to their feet, the elevator changed direction and swerved violently round a corner, and over they went once more. Help! Shouted Mrs. TV. Take my hand, madame, said Mr. Wonka gallantly. There you are. Now grab this strap. Everybody grab a strap. The journey's not over yet. So it's kind of like a mean joke, I guess. He thought it was funny, but it was at the other people's expense. That's not very nice. Old Grandpa Joe staggered to his feet and caught hold of a strap. Little Charlie, who couldn't possibly reach as high as that, put his arms around Grandpa Joe's legs and hung on tight. The elevator rushed on at the speed of a rocket. Now it was beginning to climb. It was shooting up and up and up on a steep, slanty course as if it were climbing a very steep hill. I'm connecting to when you're going up on a roller coaster. It's just like, oh my goodness. You get that kind of nervous feeling in your tummy because you know something's going to give. Then suddenly, as though it had come to the top of the hill and gone over a precipice, it dropped like a stone, and Charlie felt his tummy coming right up into his throat, and Grandpa Joe shouted, Yippee! Here we go! And Mrs. TV cried out, The rope has broken! We're going to crash! And Mr. Wonka said, Calm yourself, my dear lady, and patted her comfortably on the arm. And then Grandpa Joe looked down at Charlie, who was clinging to his legs, and he said, Are you all right, Charlie? Charlie shouted, I love it! It's like being on a roller coaster! And through the glass walls of the elevator, as it rushed along, they caught sudden glimpses of strange and wonderful things going on in some of the other rooms. An enormous spout with brown sticky stuff oozing out of it onto the floor. A great craggy mountain made entirely of fudge with Oompa Loompas, all roped together for safety, hacking huge hunks of fudge out of its sides. I haven't heard that word craggy. Craggy mountain. Have you heard that one before? Based on the context clues around, it says, a great craggy mountain made entirely of fudge with Oompa Loompas hacking huge hunks of fudge out of its sides. Wonder what craggy means. I don't really know from that description. Might be something we could look up later. A lake of hot caramel with steam coming off it. A village of Oompa Loompas with tiny houses and streets and hundreds of Oompa Loompas. Children no more than 4 inches high playing in the streets, just so little. And now the elevator began flattening out again, but it seemed to be going faster than ever, and Charlie could hear the scream of the wind outside as it hurtled forward. And it twisted, and it turned, and it went up, and it went down, and I'm going to be sick, yelled Mrs. TV, turning green in the face. Please don't be sick, said Mr. Wonka. Try and stop me, said Mrs. TV. Then you'd better take this, said Mr. Wonka, and he swept his magnificent black top hat off his head and held it out, upside down, in front of Mrs. TV's mouth. Make this awful thing stop, ordered Mr. TV. Can't do that, said Mr. Wonka. It won't stop till we get there. I only hope no one's using the other elevator at this moment. What other elevator? Screamed Mrs. TV. The one that goes the opposite way on the same track as this one, said Mr. Wonka. Holy mackerel, cried Mr. TV. You mean we might have a collision? I've always been lucky so far, said Mr. Wonka. Now I am going to be sick, yelled Mrs. TV. No, no, said Mr. Wonka, not now. We're nearly there. Don't spoil my hat. The next moment, there was a screaming of brakes, and the elevator began to slow down. Then it stopped altogether. Ooh, I like that, a screaming of brakes. You really get this idea of what that would be like. Good description. Some ride, said Mr. TV, wiping his great sweaty face with a handkerchief. Never again, gasped Mrs. TV. And then the doors of the elevator slid open and Mr. Wonka said, just a minute now, listen to me. I want everybody to be very careful in this room. There is dangerous stuff around in here, and you must not tamper with it. Dun, dun, dun. That's the end of the chapter. That was a great chapter. That was so exciting. Did you like it? I hope so. Okay, see you guys soon.